So one of the trends that I'm seeing right now with these youth climate marches and this sort of massive effort that I'm seeing from nonprofit organizations and as certain journalists have described it, the nonprofit industrial complex have really deep ties to, I would say, the billionaire class, the very wealthy class of individuals that have they want to transform our economy into a so-called sustainable economy, but it's still a capitalist economy. It's still based on the idea of growth. And I think that that's one of the major underlying flaws of many of these major projects, or these sort of big activist groups, is that they're not really critically analyzing the very systems that have gotten us into this situation to begin with. And one of the fears that I have is that, yes, we will start to do things like you're recommending, not you specifically, but some of the ideas that you brought up. And that'll be only in service to maintaining a socioeconomic system that is actually that does not blend in any real way with actual sustainability. Actually living in sort of a balance with the ecosystems of this planet or the natural world itself. I find that it's very possible that the narrative is currently being hijacked by these individuals, by these groups.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And that to me is a big fear. So when I think about your geoengineering suggestions, and I'm like, okay, yeah, let's figure this out. Let's see if we can throw a few ideas out there. And I want to sound defeatist, and I'm really trying.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're saying. I mean, let me give an example, a good example that fits right in with what you're saying. Okay.
Okay.
So in the 70s, 72, the Club of Rome published their book, famous book, The Limits to Growth. Right, and they said that the human population couldn't keep growing much because, and I guess the population was it was about 1 billion in the 60s. Maybe it was not quite 2 billion by that time when that book came out. Not sure exactly. Somebody can it could be looked up easily. But the point was that they said that that food supply was increasing at a certain rate, population was increasing at an exponential rate, and that alone would put an upper limit to population. It couldn't keep growing. There were limits to the growth. And they also talked about minerals and things that people used. And what happened, of course, was that we had these enormous breakthroughs in farming. And we managed to double yields, double the amount of crops that could come off a field, and then double it again, and double it again, and double it again. And yields went way, way up, and that avoided the upper limit at that time. So let's just think for a minute let's say that technology had not come along, okay, back then. And if that technology had not come along, there would have been massive starvation. Like if population probably still would have grown and grown until there was, massive food shortages and massive starvation, putting a limit on the population. Then humans would have had to actually sit up and say, okay, we have to take some hard actions here. We can't, do we want to have these continuous cycles where we get mass die-offs of humans from starvation, and then society then picks up and continues, and then population grows exponentially, and then another mass die-off and another mass die-off, right? Or do we want to say, well, we have to talk about the whole system of the planet and how many people can live on the planet, and figure out how to live within the means and be truly sustainable. And if that had happened, now we wouldn't be having the climate crisis that we're having, right? We would have a global population of maybe a couple billion and not 7.5 billion. We would have had to deal with exponential growth and stuff, and consumerism growth and stuff like that, and we'd have quite a different world. So the argument is that, so I see exactly what you're saying. So geoengineering could be like these huge improvements in food production back in the 70s. Maybe in the long run for humanity, these things would work in the short run and allow us to continue our way of life and capitalism to continue and population growth to continue until we reach another wall, which we eventually can't solve, and we have a population crash, right? So the point is when I talk about these sort of things, I talk about them from a survival standpoint. Like I talk about them for how can we preserve some semblance of humanity. How do we restore an ecosystem? How do we ensure that we don't have a mass extinction on the planet that includes ourselves? Right? These are like emergency stopgap measures, but they're no good unless we address these underlying issues like the population and rampant consumerism and all of this crazy stuff. I mean, I just in the oceanography stuff I've been looking at, there's a good section on the Emirate of Dubai and how they're changing the coastlines, how they've basically dredged up millions of tons of sand and created artificial islands in the shape of a pineapple, and,
Yeah.
and how they have all of these very wealthy people that are buying places on these artificial islands. And these things are all, built. It's like, don't build houses on sand. Right?
Yeah.
Like the excesses of humanity, it makes you sort of wonder, do we even deserve to have this planet?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean, we go, it's craziness, and then it extends to the politics and so on. So, these ideas of removing CO2 and cooling the Arctic and things like that. These ideas are, they're not for trying to preserve by any means any of the systems that we have as far as rampant capitalism and exponential population growth and stuff. They're trying, it's more of a survival thing so that people can live longer term on this planet, and that everything doesn't completely collapse for us, which is what it's doing. That's what exponential growth does.
Definitely.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but I guess maybe the pain still needs to get a lot greater for people before they'll sit up and say, well, what can we do? What are we going to do?